The last species that made humans furious. We erased them from the galaxy. Ambassador Soman had been a diplomat for 30 years. She had negotiated trade agreements, prevented wars, and built bridges between species that had been enemies for centuries. She believed in the power of words and the possibility of peace and the fundamental goodness that existed in all sentient beings. But as she sat in her office reading the latest intelligence reports, she felt that belief cracking. Captain Junho had returned to Earth with Kyung-Soo and the other survivors. The young man was physically healing, but his mind was broken. He spent hours talking to counselors, trying to process what he had witnessed. And the more he remembered, the worse the story became. They had done this before, Kyung-Soo told Junho during one session. I heard them talking about it. They were comparing this hunt to others they had done. They were rating us. They said human children were better sport than the previous species they had hunted. Dr. Hana was compiling all the evidence they had gathered. Her research into galactic archives had revealed disturbing patterns. The 3 species that had gone extinct in Veclith space had all been peaceful. All had been physically weaker than the Veclith. And in each case, the final records showed sudden population drops, missing colonies, and unexplained disappearances before the species vanished entirely. They're serial killers on a galactic scale, Hana told Admiral Taman. The Veclith don't just conquer. They enjoy the hunt. They need prey. And the Galactic Council let them in anyway. Commander Deho's investigation was uncovering more attacks every day. The 12 colonies they had found were just the beginning. Going back through records, cross-referencing missing ships and unexplained incidents, he was finding evidence of Veclith attacks going back 3 years. Hundreds of ships had vanished. Thousands of humans were missing. They've been testing us, Deho reported to Earth's military command. Small attacks, isolated incidents, seeing how we would respond. When we didn't respond strongly, they escalated. New Jeju wasn't the first major colony attack. It was just the first one where they left a survivor to tell the story. Admiral Taman called an emergency meeting of Earth's Defense Council. Every major military leader was present, along with the president and key government officials. Ambassador Soman was there too, though she felt increasingly out of place in a room full of soldiers. We've tried the diplomatic approach, Taman said. The Galactic Council has refused to act. Meanwhile, the Veclith have publicly announced that humans are acceptable prey. That announcement had come 2 days ago. A Veclith broadcaster had made a public transmission throughout their territory, declaring that humans had weak laws and that taking human trophies was now officially permitted within the Dominion. It was a direct challenge, a spit in humanity's face. Some council members have privately admitted they know what's happening, Counselor Myray added. But they're afraid. The Veclith have the 3rd largest military in the galaxy. The council doesn't want to risk a war that could tear the galaxy apart. So they're willing to sacrifice humanity to maintain peace, the president said quietly. Ambassador Soman stood up. There must be another way. If we go to war, we become like them. We can't let rage dictate our actions. Admiral Taman looked at her with tired eyes. Ambassador, I respect you, but I watched that footage from the child's neural implant. I saw what they did, and I know that every day we wait, more children are taken. Tell me, how do we negotiate with that? Salman had no answer. She had watched the footage too. She had seen things that would haunt her forever. Children in cages. Veclith warriors placing bets on which child would survive longest in their hunting grounds. The casual cruelty. The entertainment they took from suffering. We can try sanctions, Soman said weakly. Economic pressure, isolation, we can... They've been hunting us for 3 years, Deho interrupted. Do you think they care about trade agreements? The president stood. We will hold a vote. All in favor of declaring war on the Veclith Dominion, raise your hand. Every hand went up. Even Ambassador Soman, after a long moment, raised her hand. She felt something die inside her as she did it, but she raised it anyway. The next day, Counselor Mirai stood before the Galactic Council one last time. Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, she announced. We joined this body believing in justice, in law, in the protection of all sentient life. This council has shown us that these are just words. You have failed to protect human citizens. You have failed to hold the Veclith accountable. You have chosen politics over justice. We will not remain part of this failure. The council chamber erupted in chaos. No species had ever voluntarily withdrawn from the council. Several ambassadors tried to speak, to convince Mirai to reconsider, but she simply walked out. The Veclith representative Throck laughed. The soft species runs away when challenged. Typical human weakness. That same day, Admiral Taman activated Operation Silent Fury. For 200 years, while humanity had presented itself as peaceful and diplomatic, they had been preparing. They had been building. They had been planning for the day when words failed and violence became necessary. Hidden shipyards throughout human space came online. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as mining stations revealed their true purpose. Soldiers who had been training in secret deployed to their ships, and the weapons, the terrible weapons that humanity had developed but never used, were finally brought out of storage. Dr. Nari led the weapons division. She was a brilliant scientist who had spent her career developing technologies that made her sick to think about. These weapons violate 17 Galactic Council conventions on warfare, she told Admiral Taman. They're designed to cause maximum suffering. We built them hoping we'd never need them. Now we need them, Taman said simply. The Veclith leadership received word of humanity's military buildup and laughed. Humans had been peaceful for 2 centuries. What did they know of real war? The Veclith had conquered dozens of worlds. Their warrior culture had been perfecting combat for thousands of years. They had forearms, armored skin, and superior strength. What could soft, weak humans possibly do? Throck gave a speech to his people. The humans have finally shown their true nature. They are prey pretending to be predators. They withdraw from the council because they know they cannot win fairly. But we Veclith fear no one. If they want war, we will teach them why we are the superior species. The first battle happened at Arcturus Station, a human trading post near the border of Veclith space. A Veclith war fleet arrived expecting to find frightened humans begging for mercy. Instead, they found Captain Junho's ship waiting for them. Junho was no longer commanding a diplomatic vessel. He now led a destroyer group specifically designed for one purpose: killing Veclith. When the Veclith fleet arrived, Junho gave a simple order: fire everything. The Veclith expected traditional warfare. They expected challenges and formal declarations. They expected rules. Humans gave them none of that. The human ships used weapons that tore through shields like they weren't there. They used tactics that made no sense, taking damage to their own ships to get killing shots on Veclith vessels. They fought like people who didn't care if they died, as long as they took the enemy with them. The Veclith fleet was destroyed in minutes. Not defeated, destroyed. Every ship was torn apart. When the battle ended, Junho sent a message to the Veclith Dominion. You hunted our children. Now we hunt you. Back on Earth, General Heejin was preparing ground forces. She had spent years studying every conflict in human history, learning from every mistake, perfecting the art of total war. Her soldiers weren't trained to fight honorably. They were trained to win, no matter the cost. The Veclith think they're warriors, Heejin told her troops. They think they know war because they've conquered weak species. But they've never fought humans. They've never fought a species that spent 10,000 years fighting itself. They don't know what real war looks like. We're going to teach them. The Galactic Council watched the Battle of Arcturus and felt a cold fear settle over them. They had thought they knew humanity. They had been wrong. The species that had been peaceful for 2 centuries had not forgotten how to wage war. They had simply been choosing not to. Now humanity had stopped choosing peace, and the galaxy was about to learn why that was a terrible thing. The last species that made humans furious. We erased them from the galaxy, Captain. Junho stood on the bridge of the Harmony's edge, watching the stars blur past as his ship traveled through space. He had been a diplomat for 15 years, and in all that time he had never fired a weapon in anger. That was the way of humanity now. They talked, they negotiated, they found peaceful solutions. The Galactic Council had 47 member species, and humans were proud to be among them. For 200 years, humanity had proven itself worthy of respect through trade, science, and careful diplomacy. Other species saw humans as soft, perhaps, but they also saw them as trustworthy. Dr. Hana entered the bridge, her face troubled. She was the ship's chief xenobiologist and had spent years studying alien cultures. Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from New Jeju Colony. Junho felt his stomach tighten. New Jeju was a small farming colony on the edge of human space, home to about 5,000 people. What's happening? The signal cut off mid-transmission, Hana said quietly. But before it did, they said they were under attack. Junho immediately ordered the ship to maximum speed. The Harmony's Edge was a diplomatic vessel, not a warship, but it was fast. They reached New Jeju in 6 hours. What they found made Junho's blood run cold. The colony was burning. Buildings lay in ruins. Fields that had been green with crops were now blackened and destroyed. Yunyo led a team down to the surface, and with every step the horror grew worse. There were bodies, not many, which was somehow more disturbing. A colony of 5,000 people, and they found only a few dozen dead. Where were the others? "Captain, you need to see this," called one of his officers from near the central square. Junho walked over and saw something that made no sense. There were weapons scattered on the ground, human weapons barely used. There were signs of a fight, but it had been one-sided and brutal. Whatever had attacked the colony had been fast and overwhelming. Dr. Hana was examining the damage with her equipment. "These burns aren't from standard weapons," she said. "The energy signature matches Veclith technology, the Veclith Dominion. They were a new member of the Galactic Council, having joined only 5 years ago. They were a warrior species, tall and powerful, with 4 arms and thick armored skin. They had made no secret of their belief that military might was the only true measure of worth." "Are you certain?" Yunyo asked. Hana nodded grimly. "There's no doubt." They continued searching and finally found someone alive. A young man named Kyung-soo was hiding in a collapsed building, barely conscious. The medical team rushed him back to the ship. When Kyung-soo was strong enough to speak, Junho sat beside his bed. "Can you tell me what happened?" Kyung-soo's eyes were empty, haunted. "They came at night. Ships appeared without warning. We tried to fight, but they were so fast. They had weapons we couldn't defend against." "Did you see who they were?" Junho asked gently. "The Veclith," Kyung-soo whispered. "They were laughing. Captain, they were laughing while they did it. They didn't just kill people. They hunted them. Like it was a game." Junho felt something cold settle in his chest. "Hunted?" "They took the children," Kyung-soo said, and tears rolled down his face. "They specifically targeted the children. They took them alive. I heard one of them say that young humans make the best trophies." Junho had to leave the room. He stood in the corridor, hands shaking. Trophies. They had taken human children as trophies. Back on Earth, Admiral Taemin received Yunho's report in his office. Taemin was an old man who had served in Earth's United Fleet for 40 years. He had seen much in his life, but this report made him feel sick. He immediately contacted Counselor Mirai, humanity's representative on the Galactic Council. "We need an emergency session," he told her. "The Veclith have attacked New Jeju." The council met 3 days later. Counselor Mirai presented the evidence. She showed the images from New Jeju. She played Kyung-soo's testimony. She demanded justice. The Veclith representative, a massive warrior named Throck, stood and spoke in a booming voice. "The Dominion denies any involvement in this incident. These are baseless accusations from a species looking to blame others for their own failures to protect their colonies." "We have evidence," Mirai said firmly. "You have assumptions," Throck replied. "Energy signatures can be faked. Traumatized witnesses are unreliable. Where is your proof?" The council deliberated. In the end, they voted not to take action. There was not enough concrete proof, they said. It could have been pirates using stolen Veclith weapons. The Veclith were new council members, and the council did not want to risk a diplomatic incident over uncertain evidence. Mirai returned to Earth furious and heartbroken. She met with Admiral Taemin and the leadership of Earth's government. "They won't help us," she said. "The council is too afraid of the Veclith military to act." Meanwhile, Commander Deho of Military Intelligence was conducting his own investigation. What he found was worse than anyone had imagined. New Jeju wasn't the first attack. Over the past year, 12 human colonies had gone silent. Everyone had assumed it was the dangers of frontier space, raiders, or equipment failures. But now, looking back with new eyes, Deho saw a pattern. Each colony had been hit the same way. Fast, brutal, with most of the population taken rather than killed. Each attack had the same energy signatures. The Veclith had been hunting humans for a year and nobody had noticed. Dr. Hana made another disturbing discovery. She accessed the Galactic Archives and found historical records of the Veclith. Before joining the Council, the Veclith had encountered 3 other species in their region of space. All 3 of those species were now extinct. The official records said they had died out from natural causes or war among themselves. But Hana found older records, sealed records, that told a different story. The Veclith had hunted those species to extinction for sport. Back on the Harmony's edge, Junho received a message that changed everything. A human merchant ship had managed to rescue a group of children from a Veclith vessel. One of the children had a neural implant that had recorded everything she had seen. The military intelligence team sent Junho the footage with a warning that it was extremely disturbing. Junho watched the footage alone in his quarters. He watched it once and then he had to stop. He sat in the darkness, shaking. What he had seen was beyond cruelty. It was beyond evil. The Veclith had been keeping human children in cages, treating them like animals, hunting them in enclosed arenas while other Veclith watched and cheered. Junho forwarded the footage to Admiral Taman without comment. He knew that once Taman saw it, everything would change. Humanity had tried peace. They had tried diplomacy. They had tried working within the system. The system had failed. The Council had failed, and now humanity's children were being hunted for sport while the galaxy looked away. Admiral Taman watched the footage in his office. When it ended, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up his communication device and began making calls. He called every admiral, every general, every leader in Earth's military. He called the president of Earth's united government. He called people who hadn't spoken to each other in years. And to each one he said the same thing: we're going to war. The last species that made humans furious? We erased them from the galaxy. The refusal to accept surrender shocked the galaxy. Species across known space watched as humanity continued its campaign against the Veclith, despite their attempts to capitulate. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions debating whether to intervene by force. But every time they came close to a decision, they would remember what humanity had done to the Veclith military, and they would hesitate. Admiral Taman knew exactly what he was doing. He was sending a message not just to the Veclith, but to everyone watching. This was what happened when you made humanity furious. This was the price of hunting human children. Captain Junho's fleet was now the most feared force in the war. His ships appeared without warning at Veclith colonies, and what followed was systematic destruction. Not random violence, but calculated elimination of everything that made the Veclith dangerous. Military bases were destroyed first, then weapons factories, then shipyards, then government buildings. But Junho did something else too. He made sure every action was recorded and broadcast throughout the galaxy. He wanted everyone to see. He wanted the images of burning Veclith cities to be forever associated with the consequences of attacking humanity. On one colony world, Junho's forces cornered a Veclith hunting party that had been active in raids against human worlds. These particular Veclith had specialized in hunting human children. Their trophy rooms were filled with evidence of their crimes. Junho gave them a choice. You like to hunt, he said over an open communication channel. Now you get to know what it feels like. We'll give you a 10-minute head start. If you survive for 24 hours, we'll let you live. If not, he left the sentence unfinished. The Veclith warriors who had terrorized helpless victims ran in panic. None of them survived the full 24 hours. Junho made sure the footage was broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. Some species protested. They called it barbaric. They called it war crimes. Humanity's response was to broadcast the footage from Krios 7, the trophy facility. They showed the galaxy what the Veclith had done. They showed the cages, the preserved bodies, the planning documents. And then they asked a simple question. Where were you when this was happening? Where was the Galactic Council? Where was justice? No one had a good answer. Colonel Bora's ground forces had become legendary among human troops and terrifying to the Veclith. She led from the front and her soldiers followed her anywhere. On the colony world of Veclith Prime 9, she led an assault that broke the back of Veclith resistance in that sector. The Veclith defenders were entrenched in a mountain fortress. It should have taken weeks to assault, maybe months. Bora's forces took it in 3 days. They used tactics that the Veclith couldn't comprehend. They attacked from directions that should have been impossible. They fought through conditions that should have stopped any advance. And they never ever gave up. When the fortress fell, Bora found the commander, a Veclith general named Krax, who had personally led raids on 5 human colonies. He begged for mercy, saying he was just following orders, that he had a family, that he deserved a trial. Bora looked at him with cold eyes. Did you give mercy to the children you hunted? Did you care about their families? Krax had no answer. That's what I thought, Boris said and walked away. She left his fate to the soldiers whose friends and family had died in his raids. Dr. Nari's weapons were being deployed across Veclith space. The planet-killer toxins turned 3 Veclith worlds into dead zones. The atmosphere remained breathable, but something in the air prevented any complex life from forming. Those worlds would be empty for thousands of years. The nano-weapons were worse. They were designed to target Veclith DNA specifically. Released on a world, they would spread through the population, causing a plague that only affected the Veclith. It wasn't immediately fatal. That would have been too merciful. Instead, it caused slow degeneration, weakness, and eventually death over several months. It gave the Veclith time to understand what was happening to them. Time to be afraid. These weapons are immoral, Dr. Nari told Admiral Taman after deploying the first batch. I feel like a monster using them. You are a monster, Taman replied quietly. We all are now. But they made us this way. They created these monsters when they decided to hunt our children. The psychological warfare was perhaps the cruelest weapon. Human forces would broadcast messages to Veclith colonies before attacking. They would describe in detail what was coming. They would show images of other colonies that had fallen. They would give exact timelines of when the attack would arrive. And then they would wait. The Veclith populations would panic. Some would try to flee, but there was nowhere to go. Some would try to prepare defenses, but nothing they built could stop what was coming. Some would just wait in terror, knowing death was approaching and being unable to do anything about it. When human forces finally arrived, they often found the colonies in chaos. The Veclith were so frightened that they barely offered resistance. The psychological weapons had already defeated them before a single shot was fired. The Galactic Council tried one more time to stop the war. They sent a delegation to Earth, begging to speak with human leadership. Ambassador Soman, despite her role in declaring the war, agreed to meet with them. The delegation consisted of 12 species, each one pleading for humanity to show mercy. The Veclith have been defeated, they argued. Their military is broken. Their colonies are in ruins. Enough blood has been spilled. End this war. Soman listened to them all, and then she asked them to watch something. She showed them the footage from Creo 7, every minute of it. The trophy rooms, the cages, the children, the planning documents. She made them watch all of it. When it was over, several of the delegates were crying. All of them looked sick. This is what they did, Somin said quietly. This is what your council allowed to happen. You knew the Veclith were predators. You knew their history. You let them into the council anyway. You ignored our warnings. You dismissed our evidence. And when we proved what they were doing, you told us there wasn't enough proof. You let our children die because you were too afraid to act. We made a mistake, one delegate said. But genocide is not the answer. You're right, someone agreed. Genocide is not the answer. But this isn't genocide. This is extermination. We're not killing them because of what they are. We're killing them because of what they did. There's a difference. The delegation left Earth with no promises, no agreements, no hope of stopping the war. They reported back to the Council that humanity could not be reasoned with. Humanity was beyond mercy. What the Council didn't understand was that humanity had mercy. They had mercy for species who made mistakes. They had mercy for those who could change. They had mercy for almost everyone. But the Veclith had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They had hunted children, and for that, humanity had no mercy at all. By the 6th month of the war, 42 of the 47 Veclith colony worlds had fallen. The remaining 5 were under siege. The Veclith population was scattered, broken, and terrified. Their mighty warrior culture, so proud for thousands of years, was shattered. Admiral Taman stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at a map of Veclith space. It was almost all red now, marking territories under human control. Just a few spots of blue remained. How long until we control all their worlds? He asked. 3 weeks at most, his tactical officer replied. Taman nodded slowly. And then we moved to Phase 2. Phase 2, sir? We're not just defeating them, Taman said quietly. We're making sure they can never do this again, to anyone, ever. Captain Junho received his new orders and felt cold. What Admiral Taman was planning went beyond anything they had done so far. It would be final, absolute, and there would be no coming back from it. But when Junho thought about the children in those cages, When he remembered the trophy rooms and the hunting grounds and the planning documents, he found he didn't care. The Veclith had made their choice. Now humanity was making theirs. The galaxy watched and waited, wondering how far humanity would go. They were about to find out. The last species that made humans furious, we erased them from the galaxy. The war had been going for 3 weeks when Captain Junho received intelligence about a Veclith facility on a planet called Creo 7. The intelligence said it was a storage facility, a place where the Veclith kept their trophies. Admiral Taman ordered Junho to investigate. Junho took a strike team of 30 soldiers. They landed on Creo 7 in the middle of the night, avoiding Veclith patrols. The facility was large, built into the side of a mountain. Getting inside was easy. The Veclith had never expected anyone to attack them here. Deep in their own territory, what Junho found inside would haunt him for the rest of his life. Rooms filled with preserved remains. Humans, yes, but also members of the 3 extinct species the Veclith had hunted before. Adults and children displayed like prizes in a museum. Each had a plaque describing the hunt, the difficulty, the entertainment value. There were hundreds of them, thousands. In the deeper levels, they found the live prisoners, human children in cages, some who had been missing for years. They were thin and scared. Many couldn't even speak anymore. The soldiers moved through the facility with tears running down their faces, carrying children who couldn't walk, trying to comfort victims who flinched at their touch. Junho found a room that looked like an office. There were records there, careful logs of every hunt, every trophy. The Veclith had been documenting their crimes for centuries. They were proud of them. One of his soldiers called him to another room. "Captain, you need to see this. It was a planning room. Maps covered the walls, showing human space divided into sections. There were schedules, quotas. The Veclith had been planning a full invasion of human territory. Not to conquer, but to hunt. They had calculated how many humans they could take each year, without causing the species to go extinct. They wanted to farm humanity like livestock." Junho stood in that room and felt something change inside him. He had been angry before. He had wanted justice. But now he wanted something much simpler. He wanted the Veclith gone, not defeated, not punished, gone, erased from the galaxy as if they had never existed. He transmitted everything back to Earth, every image, every document, every terrible piece of evidence. When Admiral Taman saw it, he called an emergency meeting of every human leader. "This isn't war," Taman said quietly. "War is when 2 sides fight over territory or resources or ideology. This is extermination. They were planning to hunt humanity to the edge of extinction and then maintain us at that level forever. They think we're animals. They think we're prey." The president of Earth spoke. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" "Total war," Taman replied. "No rules, no mercy. We don't stop until the Veclith are no longer a threat. Ever." "You're talking about genocide," Ambassador Soman said, her voice shaking. "I'm talking about survival." Taman shot back. "Look at these images. Look at what they did. Look at what they were planning to do. Tell me, Ambassador, how do we coexist with this?" The vote was unanimous. Humanity would wage total war against the Veclith Dominion. There would be no diplomatic solution, no peace talks, no terms of surrender. This would end only one way. General Hiejin received her orders and smiled grimly. "Finally," she said, "no more restrictions." She deployed her forces across 17 Veclith colonies simultaneously. The Veclith had expected humans to fight like civilized species, with rules and conventions. Instead, human forces fought like humans had always fought, when truly threatened with extinction. They fought dirty. They fought smart, and they fought without any sense of fair play. On the colony world of Veclith Prime 4, Colonel Bora led her ground forces in an assault that the Veclith would talk about in terror for years after. The Veclith soldiers were bigger, stronger, and had more weapons, but Bora's forces had something the Veclith didn't understand. They had rage. Human soldiers moved through the colony like a force of nature. They didn't just fight, they hunted. Every Veclith warrior who had participated in hunts against humans was tracked down specifically. The humans had lists, names, evidence. They had done their research, and they showed those warriors exactly what it felt like to be prey. The Veclith started to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Their warrior culture had taught them to respect strength, but they had mistaken human peacefulness for weakness. Now they were learning the truth. Humans had been peaceful because they chose to be, not because they had to be. Captain Junho's fleet was hunting Veclith command ships. He had become very good at it. His ships would track a Veclith vessel for days, learning its patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. Then they would strike with overwhelming force. Junho made sure to let some crew members escape in life pods. He wanted them to tell others what had happened. He wanted the Veclith to be afraid. Dr. Nari was working around the clock developing new weapons. I never wanted to use these, she told Admiral Taman. Some of them are so terrible that I feel sick knowing they exist. Tell me about them, Taman said. We have weapons that can make a planet's atmosphere toxic, Nari explained. The planet itself survives, but nothing can live there anymore. We have nano-weapons that can target specific DNA structures. We have psychological warfare tools that can drive entire populations insane. We built all of these during the last 2 centuries, hoping we would never need them. We called them the never weapons because we swore we would never use them. Use them, Taman ordered. All of them. The Galactic Council tried to intervene. They sent messages to Earth begging humanity to stop, to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. Earth's response was brief. You had your chance to stop this. You chose not to. Now leave us alone. Several Council species offered to mediate. Others threatened sanctions. A few even suggested military intervention to stop humanity's campaign. But no one actually did anything. Because they were afraid. They had seen what humanity was doing to the Veclith, and they didn't want to be next. The Veclith Dominion was in chaos. Their military, so proud and confident just months ago, was being systematically destroyed. Colonies were falling. Their homeworld was under blockade. And everywhere human forces were showing them no mercy whatsoever. Throk, the Veclith representative who had laughed at humanity, sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council. Help us, he begged. The humans are animals. They fight without honor. They don't follow any rules of warfare. Someone must stop them. The Council did nothing. On Veclith colony worlds, the populations were starting to panic. They had heard the stories. They knew what was coming. Some tried to evacuate, but human ships controlled space. Some tried to surrender, but humans weren't accepting surrenders. Some tried to fight, but human forces were overwhelming. The Veclith military made one last attempt to change the tide of war. They gathered their remaining fleet at their throne world, Veclith Major. It was a massive force, hundreds of ships, the last strength of their military. They would make a stand there. They would show humanity that the Veclith were still powerful. Admiral Taman received the intelligence and gathered every available human warship. What arrived at Veclith Major was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Ships from every colony, every station, every corner of human space, and leading them all was Taman himself. The Veclith sent a transmission. We will fight to the last warrior. We will never surrender to prey species. Taman sent back a single message. We don't want your surrender. We want you gone. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was the bloodiest engagement of the war. Both sides took terrible losses. Ships burned in the void. Thousands died in minutes. But in the end, humanity's rage proved stronger than Veclith pride. The Veclith fleet was destroyed, broken, scattered, and then human forces descended on Veclith Major itself. General Hyejin led the ground assault personally. She walked through the capital city and saw the Veclith population cowering in fear. They had finally learned what it meant to be prey. The Veclith High Command sat in their council chamber, knowing the end was near. They had a choice to make. They could fight to the last, or they could surrender and hope for mercy. They chose surrender. They sent a message to Admiral Taman, offering complete and unconditional capitulation. They would disarm. They would accept any terms. They would do anything if humanity would just stop. Taman read the message on his flagship, surrounded by his commanders. Everyone waited for his response. Send them this message, Taman said quietly. We don't accept surrender. Not after what you did to our children. The war continued. The last species that made humans furious, we erased them from the galaxy. The last Veclith stronghold was their homeworld, Veclith Major. 5 million Veclith remained there, hiding behind whatever defenses they could build. They knew humanity was coming. They had nowhere left to run. Admiral Taman's fleet surrounded the planet. For 3 days they just waited, letting fear do its work. The Veclith population could see the human ships in orbit, could see the weapons pointed at their world. could do nothing but wait for the end. On Earth, a debate was raging that would define humanity's future. The military wanted to finish what they had started. But voices of conscience were finally being heard. Dr. Hana had returned to Earth specifically to speak against what was being planned. She stood before Earth's government and pleaded for restraint. "We've won," she said. "The Veclith are defeated. Their military is gone. Their colonies are occupied. They can never threaten us again. If we go through with this final plan, we won't destroy the Veclith. We'll destroy ourselves. We'll become the very monsters we're fighting against." Captain Junho was also there, and he was torn. He had led the hunting fleets. He had seen the trophy rooms. He had rescued children from cages. Part of him wanted the Veclith gone forever. But another part of him remembered who he used to be before the war, when he was a diplomat who believed in peace. "I found Veclith children on one of the colony worlds," Junho told the assembly. "They weren't soldiers. They'd never been on a hunt. They were just children, terrified of what was happening. One of them asked me why we were killing everyone. She didn't understand. She had done nothing wrong except to be born Veclith." Councillor Mirai, who had withdrawn humanity from the Galactic Council, spoke with a heavy heart. "I supported this war. I voted for it. But I thought we were fighting for justice. What's being planned now isn't justice. It's revenge taken so far that it becomes something else entirely, something worse." But Admiral Taman was unmoved. "I understand your concerns," he said. "I feel them myself. But we have to think long-term. The Veclith culture is built on hunting, on seeing other species as prey. How do we know they won't do this again? How do we know that in 100 years or 200, they won't rebuild and return to their old ways?" "We can monitor them," Hana suggested. "We can enforce rules, restrictions. But we can't watch them forever," Taman interrupted. "Eventually, we'll get complacent. Eventually, we'll trust them. And eventually, they'll hunt again. This is our chance to make sure that never happens." The President of Earth called for a vote. The question was simple but terrible. Should humanity proceed with complete extermination of the Veclith species? Or should they show mercy and find another solution? The vote was close. Closer than anyone expected. In the end, mercy won by just 3 votes. But it wasn't the kind of mercy that the Veclith would recognize. Admiral Taman presented the final plan. "We won't kill them all," he said. "But we will end their civilization. We will end their culture. We will end everything that made them what they are. The Veclith, as a species that hunts and kills for sport, will cease to exist." Dr. Nari explained the technical details. "We'll use a modified nano-weapon that will sterilize 90% of the remaining Veclith population. They'll live normal lifespans, but they won't be able to reproduce. The 10% who remain fertile will be scattered across different prison worlds, separated so they can never rebuild their culture. We'll erase their language," added Colonel Bora, who was part of the planning team. "Their history, their art, their literature. Everything that defines them as Veclith will be destroyed. The survivors will be taught new languages, new cultures, new values. Within 1 generation, there will be no one left who remembers what it meant to be Veclith." "And their worlds?" someone asked. "Quarantined," Taman replied. "No species will be allowed to settle them for 1,000 years. They'll stand as empty monuments to what happens when you attack humanity." Junho listened to all this and felt sick, but he also remembered the children in cages, and he said nothing. The plan was put into action. Human forces descended on Veclith Major and the remaining colony worlds. The Veclith, expecting death, were almost relieved when they weren't immediately killed. But that relief turned to horror as they understood what humanity was actually planning. The nano-weapon was deployed. It was painless, invisible, and irreversible. 90% of the surviving Veclith would never have children. Their genetic line would end with them. Teams of human specialists began the cultural erasure. Every book, every recording, every piece of art that depicted or celebrated Veclith hunting culture was destroyed. Museums were emptied. Archives were deleted. Historical sites were demolished. The Veclith, who were allowed to remain fertile, were separated and transported to different worlds across human space. They would live in monitored facilities, allowed to have children, but those children would be raised in human educational systems. They would learn human values. They would never know what it meant to hunt for sport. Dr. Hana volunteered to oversee one of these facilities. She felt responsible somehow, as if by helping to raise these children differently, she could redeem what humanity was doing. She worked with young Veclith, teaching them that all life was precious, that killing for entertainment was wrong, that they could be better than their ancestors. It was heartbreaking work. The young Veclith were innocent, but they were also the last of their kind. They would grow up as hybrids, neither truly Veclith nor truly human, belonging nowhere. The Galactic Council was forced to watch the entire process. Humanity made sure of it. They broadcast the systematic dismantling of Veclith civilization across every channel. They wanted the galaxy to see. They wanted everyone to understand what happened when you made humans furious. Some species protested. They called it cultural genocide. They said humanity had gone too far. But when human ambassadors reminded them of the trophy rooms, of the hunting grounds, of the planned farming of humanity, the protests quieted. Other species said nothing at all. They just watched and learned. They learned that humanity was not the soft species they appeared to be. They learned that humans had mercy, but that mercy had limits. They learned that if you crossed certain lines, humanity would not stop until you were erased from existence. Admiral Taman made one final broadcast to the galaxy. It would be remembered for centuries. He stood before the cameras, old and tired, and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried more weight than any shout. "Let me be clear about what happened here," he said. "The Veclith attacked our colonies. They hunted our children for sport. They planned to farm humanity like livestock. They did this while the Galactic Council watched and did nothing. We asked for justice. We asked for help. We were ignored." He paused, letting that sink in. "So we took justice into our own hands. We destroyed the Veclith military. We occupied their worlds. We erased their culture. We did this not because we're monsters, but because sometimes monsters must be fought with monstrous methods." Another pause. "But we stopped short of total genocide. We could have killed every last Veclith. Many of us wanted to. But we chose mercy instead, not for their sake, but for ours. We chose to remain human even while doing inhuman things." He looked directly into the camera. "This is our message to the galaxy. Humanity wants peace. We prefer diplomacy. We believe in law and justice and the fundamental value of all sentient life. But if you hunt our children, if you treat us as prey, if you push us to the point where we have no choice but to fight, we will not stop until you are gone. Not defeated, not conquered, gone. Your species, your culture, your civilization, all of it will be erased as if you never existed." He let that statement hang in the air. The Veclith are our lesson to the galaxy. Look at what remains of them and remember, this is what happens when you make humans furious. The broadcast ended. Admiral Taman stepped down from his position the next day. He had done what he felt was necessary, but the cost had been his soul. He retired to a quiet place and spent the rest of his days trying to find peace with what he had done. Captain Junho remained in the military, but he never commanded a warship again. He returned to diplomatic vessels, trying to rebuild what had been lost. But he was different now. Everyone could see it. The man who had been a gentle diplomat was gone, replaced by someone who had seen too much and done too much ever to forget. Dr. Hana continued her work with the young Veclith, trying to give them a future even as their past was erased. It was thankless work and it broke her heart daily, but she persisted. Someone had to try to make something good from all the horror. Counselor Mirai worked to repair humanity's relationship with the Galactic Council. It was difficult. The other species feared humanity now. But fear could be useful. Fear made sure people listened when humans spoke. Fear made sure no one would ever make the same mistake the Veclith had made. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. And everyone knew that things would never be the same again.